Alright, this short video is going to talk about the basic communication model. Now you might be asking yourself, why do we care about the basic communication model? We're in a public speaking class, not a regular comm class. And basically what I want to say is, if we understand more about how communication works, and we have something in our brains where we can say, okay, yeah, this is kind of what I'm thinking about when I am giving my speeches, and I can kind of visualize in my head this model, it's going to make it easier for us to be more effective speakers. So that's one of the things we need to think about. Also, when we take a chemistry class or we take an English class, we go through and we diagram and we model out sentences, we model out chemical formulas and that type of thing, and it helps us understand how the world works better. So we're going to be doing that with communication here as well. So let's just start out broadly. Before we can do any type of communication, we have to have some place to do the communication. And in our communication model, what we're going to call that is the channel. Alright? The channel is basically where the communication is taking place. And there are many different types of channels. For instance, you can communicate via cell phone, you can communicate via video on the internet, you can communicate via email, via text message, via mass media is a channel you can use, or just that face-to-face communication, which we might call interpersonal or dyadic communication. There's many different channels that you could use, but basically the channel is the way that you and the other person are communicating. Like I said, face-to-face is probably the one that we're most commonly using, but cell phones or other types of things like that are also going to be very common as well. Now we know that the channel is an important part of the communication because the channel affects the way that we can actually create our communication messages. For instance, the way you would not necessarily use a text message and communicate the same way via text message that you would face-to-face. For instance, face-to-face, if somebody said, hey, how did you like my play this weekend? And if you waited 8 hours to tell that person how you liked their play, that would be considered really inappropriate for face-to-face communication for that channel. However, if someone texted you, hey, how did you like that play I was in this weekend? And you didn't respond for 8 hours, they might assume that you just didn't get the text message, you didn't get time to text them back. So you have to think about the type of channel you're using when you're considering the way that you're going to be forming your message. Alright, so we've got some place for communication to take place. After we have the channel, we also then need to have somebody who's going to be creating a message. Okay? That person is going to be called the sender of the message. We also are going to need to have a third thing here. So we've got the channel and the sender. The third component is going to be the receiver, right? We can't have arguably, we can't have communication with just one person. We can have a whole conversation about that, but that's not what the point of this model is. Okay, so the sender is going to be the one that's creating the message, and the receiver is going to be the one who's going to be interpreting the message, all right? So the three parts we have so far are the channel, the sender, and the receiver. Obviously, the next thing then that we need to have is the message. All right, the message is the thing that the sender is saying or communicating to the receiver. All right, that might be an oral message, so something they said with their mouth. It might be a written message, anything like that. All right, whatever message you're sending, that's going to be what it is. It can also be things like nonverbal messages, like if somebody's smiling while they're saying something, it means something different than if they're frowning or if they're angry. The tone of their voice impacts the messages. All those are different messages that are sent from the sender to the receiver, right? Sender has something to communicate, and they send it over to the receiver, the person who's going to be listening or trying to understand what's being communicated. But that's not the only parts of communication. Right? The fifth part of our communication model is going to be called feedback. Because a receiver doesn't just sit there and understand the message. The receiver also sends messages back at the same time. So think about the last time you were telling a story to someone. That person maybe was doing some nodding, saying, mm-hmm, yep, what happened then? Those are different types of feedback that you can receive. So some of it's going to be just kind of sounds that indicate that they're understanding or not understanding you. Some of it might be questions that they might have. Some of it might be facial expressions like we were talking about. Those are all different types of feedback that your receiver is sending back to you as the sender to help you understand that they either are or are not receiving the message that you're sending. All right? So you'd say, okay, this seems like a pretty comprehensive model. However, there's one more part that we need to talk about, and that's going to be the noise. All right? In any communication situation, there is going to be noise that's going to disrupt the communication. All right? Sometimes that noise is going to be actual things that we can hear. All right? That's going to be things like cars honking or babies crying or cell phones going off. Things that distract us from either sending the message, receiving the feedback, receiving the message, sending the feedback, whatever it might be. Okay? There might also be things called psychological noise. So if you're talking with someone and they're telling you a story, and in your head you're thinking, oh, I have this huge exam for math class this week and I'm so nervous about it. And if that thought in your head is preventing you from understanding their message or really paying attention to the communication that's happening, that would be an example of noise. Okay? There are other types of things too, like if your stomach hurts really bad, you're not going to be able to understand the message or send feedback just as well because of this physiological noise that's hurting you and impacting the way that you're communicating. You might have confusion over facts that somebody's giving you. If somebody's saying something and you start thinking about in your head, oh, is that true? I'm not sure that that's true. I might need to think about that a little differently. That might be something that you would need to consider as well as a type of noise. Or if you get too focused on the little tiny details of what somebody's saying, that would be another type of noise that prevents messages and feedback from being sent really effectively. So the 7 parts of our communication model are going to be the channel, the sender, the message, the receiver, the feedback, and the noise. All 7 of these parts are present in all communication situations in different and varying amounts. So how does this relate to public speaking? Well, let's go back up to our model here. If I'm a sender, if I'm standing in front of the room and I'm trying to create a message for someone, and I know that everyone else in my audience has a biology exam directly after my speech, I know I have to work a lot harder because they've all got this noise in their head that's keeping them from listening to my message. I can also keep in mind, though, that if they're going to have trouble paying attention, they might be giving me poor feedback. They're not going to be looking as interested. They may not be doing that. And I can know that that doesn't mean that I'm a boring person. It just means that they're preoccupied. I also need to think about who it is that's going to be receiving my message. So if I'm the sender and I'm creating this message and I'm thinking about my receiver and I'm saying, okay, I know that my audience members are 4th graders. And so I need to think about the way that I'm making this message so I'm not using language they won't understand. That's another thing that I need to think about as well. So as you start considering these different ways that this relates to public speaking, you'll start to see that the channel starts to make a difference, the noise that's going to be in the room makes a difference, the message and the feedback that you receive start to impact the way that you're going to be creating your messages and receiving messages as people are giving speeches to you. So all this interacts, and it's a really important thing to think about as we're actually doing public speaking. So hopefully this has been helpful in giving you something to think about as you're starting to consider the ways that you will be creating messages for other people to understand.